My name is Duane Reynolds, and at 67 years old, I never expected to be mistaken for a janitor in my own five-star hotel. But there I stood, in worn jeans and a simple shirt, watching my daughter-in-law Elaine bark at my receptionist, "Don't talk to the old man. He's just the janitor," while my son Eric laughed alongside her. 35 years building a hospitality empire, and my own family couldn't see past my casual clothes. Where are you watching from today? Drop a comment below, hit like and subscribe for more real-life family drama. I built everything I have from nothing. That's not just some rags to riches cliché. I literally started with nothing but a high school diploma and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. My first job in the hotel industry wasn't glamorous. I was a maintenance worker at the Pinewood Motel, a rundown place on the outskirts of Burlington, Vermont. The owner, Mr. Callahan, was an old Irish immigrant who believed in hard work and attention to detail. "Duane, my boy," he used to tell me, "a guest doesn't care about fancy lobbies if their shower doesn't work. Fix the fundamentals first." Those words stuck with me throughout my career. While other hotel chains focused on chandeliers and marble floors, I built my reputation on impeccable functionality wrapped in understated elegance. When I purchased my first small motel at 29, I kept working maintenance shifts alongside managing the books. By 35, I owned 3 properties. By 40, the Reynolds Hotel Group was becoming known in the industry as a rising star. Now, 35 years after fixing that first leaky faucet at the Pinewood, I own 22 luxury hotels across North America. Despite my success, I never saw the point in changing who I was. Sure, I have a few nice suits for investor meetings and industry events, but most days you'll find me in jeans and a button-up shirt or polo. I drive a 4-year-old Chevy truck, live in the same house I bought 20 years ago, and still carry a small toolkit in my back pocket. Old habits die hard. My connection to every aspect of my business isn't just nostalgia, it's strategic. I believe a good leader should understand every job in his company. That's why I still occasionally help maintenance crews, shadow housekeeping staff, or work alongside groundskeepers. My employees respect me because they know I've done their jobs and understand their challenges. I'm not some distant figure in a corner office. My son Eric didn't inherit my passion for the hands-on approach. That's not to say he didn't work hard. I made sure of that. He worked summer jobs at my hotels throughout high school, starting in housekeeping, then maintenance, then front desk. He worked his way through college at Northwestern, graduating with a business degree that I was incredibly proud of. He had a good head on his shoulders, understood the value of hard work, and seemed to appreciate what I had built. After college, Eric wanted to branch out on his own, which I respected. He took a job with a marketing firm in Chicago and quickly rose through the ranks. By 30, he was an executive handling major accounts. I couldn't have been prouder. He was making his own way while still carrying the values I had tried to instill in him. Everything changed when Eric met Elaine at a corporate function for luxury brands. She was a marketing director for an upscale retail chain that sold $1,000 handbags and shoes that cost more than my first car. Eric was immediately taken with her. I still remember his phone call the day after they met. "Dad, she's incredible," he gushed. "Smart, sophisticated, connected. She knows everyone who matters in Chicago." That should have been my first warning sign. The emphasis on who she knew, not who she was. But I was happy to hear the excitement in my son's voice, so I encouraged him. Their romance was a whirlwind. 3 months after meeting, they were living together. 6 months in, they were engaged. A year after their first meeting, I was paying for a wedding that cost more than my first hotel. The wedding was my first real glimpse into Elaine's world. Everything had to be the best, the most exclusive, the most impressive. The venue was Chicago's most prestigious hotel. The flowers were flown in from somewhere in South America. The food was prepared by a chef whose name I recognized from television. Throughout the planning process, I noticed how Elaine would wince slightly whenever I suggested more practical options. "Duane," she'd say with a tight smile, "we want this to be special." She never called me dad or father, always Duane, with a slight emphasis that somehow made my name sound quaint and outdated. During the reception, I overheard her talking to her friends. "Eric's father is very simple," she said, not realizing I was within earshot. "Self-made, you know. Never quite adapted to success." Her friends nodded sympathetically, as though my preference for practicality over pretension was some sort of character flaw to be pitied. My late wife Susan would have known exactly how to handle Elaine. Susan had a way of firmly but kindly putting people in their place without them even realizing they'd been corrected. But Susan had passed away 5 years before the wedding, after a brief battle with pancreatic cancer. Navigating these new family dynamics without her wisdom left me feeling adrift. Despite the growing tension, I insisted on maintaining our family tradition of annual vacations. When Susan was alive, we'd take Eric to national parks, fishing trips, and once on a cross-country road trip. As Eric grew up and started his own life, we continued the tradition, though the destinations became more upscale to accommodate his changing tastes. After Eric married Elaine, the vacations became increasingly luxurious. Skiing in Vail, beach resorts in Maui, a villa in Tuscany. I went along with it because it seemed important to Eric, and I wanted to maintain our connection. But with each trip, I felt the gap between us widening. For this year's vacation, I had a different idea. I had recently opened a new property in Aspen, the Aspen Grand Hotel, my most luxurious venture yet. The property cost over $100 million to develop and had quickly become one of the most sought-after reservations in Colorado. I decided to invite Eric, Elaine, and their 2 children to stay there for a long weekend. The catch? I didn't tell them I owned it. I simply said I'd made reservations for us all and would meet them there. In my mind, it was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my son and perhaps bridge the growing divide between us. I hoped that seeing me in my element might help Eric remember the values that had shaped his childhood. Little did I know how badly my plan would backfire before ultimately bringing us to a new understanding. The subtle undermining began shortly after Eric and Elaine returned from their honeymoon. During their first visit to my home as a married couple, Elaine walked through my living room with a critical eye. "Have you ever thought about updating your furniture, Duane?" she asked, running a manicured finger across my leather recliner, the one Susan and I had purchased together 15 years earlier. "We know a fantastic interior designer who could really bring this space into this decade." I smiled politely. "I like my furniture just fine. It's comfortable." "Comfortable," she repeated, as though the word itself was distasteful. I suppose that's one approach to home design. Eric, who once loved sprawling on that same recliner watching football with me, chuckled at her comment. "Dad's not big on change, honey. You know that." It was the first of many similar exchanges. At Christmas, she gifted me an expensive watch to replace my trusty Timex. "So you can finally retire that old thing," she said with a tight smile. When I continued wearing my Timex, she took it as a personal affront. When I drove to visit them in my Chevy truck, she insisted I park a block away from their townhouse. "The neighborhood association is very particular," she explained, though I noticed plenty of other vehicles parked directly outside homes. The physical distancing became obvious at family gatherings. At Eric's 35th birthday celebration at an upscale restaurant, Elaine orchestrated the seating arrangement so that I was at the opposite end of the table from them. When group photos were taken, she would subtly shift position, placing others between us. The Christmas dinner the previous year had been particularly painful. Eric and Elaine hosted at their newly purchased home in an exclusive Chicago suburb. The entire evening felt like a showcase of their social climbing success rather than a family gathering. "Duane, did Eric tell you the Williamsons next door are on the board of the Art Institute?" Elaine mentioned while passing the potatoes. "They've invited us to the spring gala. Black tie, of course." "I don't suppose that's really your scene, though, is it?" In the past, Eric would have defended me, changed the subject, or at least given me a sympathetic glance. Instead, he laughed. "Dad would rather be fixing a broken pipe than schmoozing in a tuxedo, right, Dad?" I forced a smile. "I've worn my share of tuxedos for hotel openings." "Oh, but that's business," Elaine said dismissively. "Different thing entirely." I had tried to connect with Elaine through her own interests. When I learned she enjoyed art, I mentioned my modest collection of Western landscapes. She responded with a lecture on contemporary artists I'd never heard of, making it clear my taste was hopelessly provincial. When I brought up my foundation's charitable work with hospitality scholarships for underprivileged youth, she steered the conversation to the gala fundraisers she attended, emphasizing the celebrities present rather than the causes supported. The comments about my hands were among the most cutting. At a family dinner, I reached for the breadbasket, and Elaine's eyes fixed on my hands. "My goodness, Duane, "Your hands look like you've been doing manual labor," she said with a slight grimace. "Don't you believe in moisturizer? Or gardening gloves at least?" The truth was, I had been helping my grounds crew plant new trees at one of my Denver properties earlier that week. I was proud of those calluses. They connected me to the real work that supported all the luxury Elaine so valued. But her comment made me feel like an outsider in my own family. "Eric's hands used to look like that during his summer jobs," I said, hoping to remind my son of the values I'd tried to instill. "Thank goodness for executive positions," Eric replied with a chuckle, examining his own smooth palms. "No more dirty work for me." The moment struck me like a physical blow. The son who once took pride in learning every aspect of the hotel business now seemed embarrassed by the very work ethic that had created his privileged life. As Eric became more absorbed in Elaine's world of social climbing, I found myself increasingly isolated from my own son. Our phone calls, once weekly, dwindled to monthly formalities. When I visited Chicago, Eric was invariably swamped with meetings. The close relationship we had maintained even through his college years and early career was withering under Elaine's influence. Most concerning was how their values were affecting my grandchildren. Madison, age 8, and Tyler, age 6, were being raised in a bubble of privilege that bore no resemblance to their father's upbringing, let alone mine. Madison already had a designer handbag that cost more than a month's salary for many of my employees. Tyler had more electronic devices than I could identify, but had never learned to fish or build anything with his hands. When I sent them thoughtful but modestly priced birthday gifts, books, or educational toys, Elaine would call to thank me with a strained voice. "The children loved them," she would say, though I suspected the gifts were quickly forgotten among the piles of expensive toys and gadgets. The most hurtful incident came when I invited the grandchildren to stay with me for a weekend. I had planned fishing, hiking, and even a tour of one of my hotels where they could see the inner workings of the business their grandfather had built. "Oh, we couldn't possibly," Elaine said when Eric called to discuss the invitation. I could hear her clearly in the background. "Your father's neighborhood isn't really suitable for the children. And what would they do out there all weekend? There aren't any appropriate activities." My neighborhood was a perfectly pleasant suburb of Denver, with excellent schools and parks. The appropriate activities comment stung deeply. I had taught Eric to fish, camp, and appreciate nature in similar surroundings. Now those experiences were deemed unsuitable for my own grandchildren. What hurt most was watching Eric become someone who valued appearance over substance. The son who once worked proudly alongside housekeeping staff now seemed embarrassed by the very work ethic that had built our family's success. He had adopted Elaine's habit of name-dropping, her obsession with exclusive access, her dismissal of anything deemed insufficiently sophisticated. I found myself confiding in my old friend Thomas, who had started in the hotel business around the same time I had. Unlike me, Thomas had embraced the trappings of wealth, with a mansion, sports cars, and a yacht. But beneath the flash, he remained grounded in the values we'd shared as young men struggling to succeed. "They've forgotten what matters," I told Thomas during one of our fishing trips. "Eric used to understand the value of hard work, of treating everyone with respect regardless of their job. Now he laughs when Elaine treats service workers like they're invisible." Thomas was quiet for a moment, focusing on his fishing line. "You know, Duane," he finally said, "some lessons can't be told. They have to be experienced. You've spent years telling Eric what matters. Maybe it's time to show him." His words stuck with me. As the annual family vacation approached, an idea began to form. My new Aspen property would be the perfect setting for a lesson in values and respect. I wouldn't lecture or scold. I would simply create a situation where Eric and Elaine would have to confront the consequences of their behavior. I called Thomas that evening and shared my plan. He laughed appreciatively. "It's risky," he warned. "Could backfire completely." "I know," I admitted, "but I'm running out of options. If this doesn't work, I may have to accept that the son I raised is gone for good." The day we were set to travel to Aspen dawned bright and clear. I had arranged to drive separately, telling Eric and Elaine I needed to make a stop along the way to meet with a business associate. In reality, I wanted to arrive at the hotel early to check on operations before they arrived. Elaine had texted me that morning. "Please try to dress appropriately for the hotel, Duane. The Aspen Grand is very exclusive." If she only knew. I dressed in my typical casual attire, jeans and a simple button-up shirt with comfortable walking shoes. As I packed my small suitcase, I added a sports jacket as a concession to the upscale restaurants we would likely visit. But I had no intention of pretending to be someone I wasn't, even at my own luxury property. The drive to Aspen was beautiful, winding through the Colorado mountains with views that never failed to take my breath away. I had chosen this location for my newest hotel partly because of my personal love for the landscape. 3 hours into the drive, my hotel manager Patricia called. "Everything's ready for Operation Family Lesson," she said with a hint of amusement in her voice. Patricia had been with me for 15 years, working her way up from front desk to managing my flagship property. Like all my long-term employees, she understood my philosophy of authentic service and unpretentious luxury. "Thanks, Patricia. I appreciate your help with this. It might get uncomfortable. After what you told me about how they treated you at Christmas?" "I'm looking forward to it," she replied. "Don't worry, we'll be professional. But I can't promise some of the staff won't enjoy the reveal a little too much. They're very protective of you." That loyalty was something I had earned through years of fair treatment and genuine respect for every employee, from dishwashers to executives. It was one of the things I was most proud of in my career. I arrived at the Aspen Grand Hotel an hour before Eric and Elaine were expected. Rather than pulling up to the grand entrance with its uniformed valets and sweeping stone archway, I drove around to the staff parking area at the rear of the property. Several employees recognized my truck and waved as I parked. The Aspen Grand was my most ambitious project to date. Set against the backdrop of Aspen Mountain, the building combined rustic stone and timber with clean modern lines. Inside, the design balanced mountain luxury with sophisticated restraint. No garish displays of wealth, just impeccable materials, thoughtful details, and service that anticipated needs without intruding. I entered through the employee entrance, greeting the kitchen staff who were preparing for dinner service. The executive chef, Miguel, immediately offered to prepare my favorite dish that evening. I thanked him, but explained the situation. His eyes widened, then he grinned. "I'll make sure the family service is impeccable," he assured me. "And perhaps a special amuse-bouche for everyone except your table?" I laughed. "Don't go overboard. This isn't about punishing them. It's about teaching a lesson." Making my way through the back corridors, I greeted employees by name, asking about their families, complimenting recent work. This wasn't for show. I made a point of knowing my people, from the newest dishwasher to the most seasoned manager. It was good business, but more importantly, it was the right thing to do. As I entered the soaring main lobby with its massive stone fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows framing mountain views, I noticed a maintenance worker on a ladder, examining one of the custom light fixtures. I recognized Jimmy, who had been with the company for nearly a decade. "Having trouble with the Andersons' installation?" I asked, referring to the local artists who had created the distinctive wrought iron and blown glass fixtures. Jimmy looked down, surprised. "Mr. Reynolds, didn't know you were coming today." "Yeah, this one's got a loose connection. Been flickering since yesterday. Need a hand? I've got time before my family arrives." Jimmy knew better than to refuse. Over the years, my employees had learned that my offers to help weren't empty gestures. I genuinely enjoyed keeping my hands busy and my skills sharp. He handed me a tool belt as I climbed the ladder. Connections behind the mount plate. Wiring looks good, but the screw terminals might be loose. I removed the decorative plate and immediately spotted the issue. "Vibration from the HVAC system probably loosened these over time," I commented, tightening the terminals with a small screwdriver. "We should check all the fixtures in this section. Make it part of the quarterly maintenance." Just as I finished securing the connection, Patricia appeared in the lobby. She suppressed a smile at the sight of me on the ladder in my casual clothes, now slightly dusty. "I see you've wasted no time getting your hands dirty," she remarked as I climbed down. I handed the tool belt back to Jimmy. "Just a loose connection. All fixed now." Patricia gestured toward my shirt, which now had a smudge of dust and a small grease stain from the fixture. "Your family is due to arrive in 15 minutes. Want to clean up first?" I considered it for a moment. My original plan had been to meet them in the lobby properly cleaned up, then gradually reveal my connection to the hotel. But looking down at my work-stained clothes, another idea formed. "No, I think this presentation might be more effective," I decided. "Let them see me exactly as I am." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Bold choice. You're sure?" "I'm sure. Let's stick with the plan otherwise." They have reservations under Eric's name, standard check-in procedure. I've registered separately under my own name. She nodded. And the staff knows not to reveal your ownership unless directly asked or until you give the signal. Perfect. I took a deep breath. I'm still not sure this is the right approach, Patricia. She touched my arm lightly. If you don't mind me saying so, Mr. Reynolds, from what you've told me, they need this wake-up call. Sometimes people don't appreciate what they have until they're confronted with their own behavior. I nodded, thanked her, and went to wash my hands in the staff restroom. Looking in the mirror, I saw a man in his late 60s with silver hair, weathered skin from years of outdoor work, and hands that showed evidence of a lifetime of building something meaningful. The greasy smudge on my blue button-up shirt and the dust on my jeans completed the picture of someone who wasn't afraid of honest work. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was I being petty? Would this make the rift with my son even worse? But then I remembered Elaine's dismissive comments, Eric's embarrassed laughter, and the values being instilled in my grandchildren. No, this wasn't about pride or revenge. It was about honesty and respect, the foundations of any meaningful relationship. I splashed water on my face, took a deep breath, and headed to the lobby. Through the glass front doors, I could see a sleek black SUV pulling up to the entrance. A valet rushed to open the door. Showtime. I positioned myself near the reception desk as the automatic doors slid open. Elaine entered first, a vision of calculated luxury. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place despite the mountain drive. She wore what I assumed was a designer outfit, cream-colored pants, and a cashmere sweater, accessorized with gold jewelry that caught the light from the lobby chandeliers. Her oversized sunglasses remained on despite being indoors, a habit I had always found slightly pretentious. Behind her came Eric, looking uncomfortable in a tailored blue suit that seemed to constrain his athletic build. My son had always been more at ease in casual clothes, something we had in common once. Now he dressed as though constantly prepared for an impromptu board meeting. The suit was beautiful, no doubt, but seeing him fidget with the collar made my heart ache for the relaxed young man he used to be. Madison and Tyler trailed behind their parents, each clutching an electronic device, their eyes downcast despite the magnificent lobby surrounding them. Madison, in a miniature version of her mother's designer style, didn't even look up when a hotel staff member greeted her. Tyler at least mumbled a hello, though his attention remained fixed on his gaming device. Following them was a porter, struggling with a cart loaded with far more luggage than anyone could possibly need for a weekend stay. I counted 6 suitcases, plus numerous smaller bags. By contrast, my single carry-on size suitcase was already in my room. I approached the reception desk, standing a few feet away from the family, who had yet to notice me. Sarah, the young receptionist I had met earlier during my arrival, was handling check-ins with professional efficiency. She saw me and smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Reynolds. How can I help you?" Before I could respond, Elaine's head whipped around at the mention of my name, her eyes widening slightly behind her sunglasses as she registered my presence. Rather than a greeting, her lips pursed in obvious disapproval at my appearance. "Excuse me," she interrupted, stepping in front of me, though I had clearly been at the desk first. "We have a reservation. Anderson party." Sarah glanced between us, maintaining her professional composure. "I'll be happy to help you in just a moment, ma'am. I was just assisting this gentleman." That's when it happened. Elaine's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively in my direction as she leaned across the counter, invading Sarah's space. "Don't talk to the old man. He's just the janitor." Her voice was sharp enough to carry across the lobby, causing several guests to turn and stare. "We're checking in, and we're in a hurry." A shocked silence fell over the reception area. Sarah's professional smile froze on her face as she looked between Elaine and me, clearly uncertain how to proceed. Behind the reception desk, I could see another staff member's jaw literally drop. The moment hung in the air for what felt like an eternity but was likely only seconds. Then Eric, my son, the boy I had raised to respect every person regardless of their position, laughed. It wasn't a full-throated laugh, more of an uncomfortable chuckle, but it cut deeper than Elaine's words. "Mom's waiting for us in the car, Dad," he said, as though explaining to a child. "Maybe go help with her bags instead of bothering the staff." The fiction that I was there to help with luggage, rather than as a guest myself, was apparently the story they had settled on to explain my presence to the staff. My own son couldn't even acknowledge me as a fellow guest at a luxury hotel. I felt the physical sensation of humiliation wash over me like ice water. My face grew hot, my stomach clenched, and for a moment I struggled to maintain my composure. Around us, the busy lobby seemed to freeze. Several staff members who knew exactly who I was stared in disbelief. A few guests who had been chatting nearby fell silent, witnessing the uncomfortable scene. Sarah looked to me for guidance, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I gave her a subtle nod, indicating she should play along for now. She swallowed visibly before turning back to Elaine. "I apologize for the delay, ma'am. Let me check you in right away." I stepped aside silently, feeling strangely detached from my body as I watched the scene unfold. Elaine began making demands immediately. We were promised a Mountain View suite, the best one available, and we'll need dinner reservations at the Summit restaurant for 7:30. I understand the chef trained in Paris. Sarah handled the requests professionally while shooting concerned glances in my direction. "Yes, ma'am. We have you in one of our premium Mountain View suites, and I'd be happy to arrange those dinner reservations for you. And we'll need a bottle of champagne sent up. Complimentary, of course," Elaine added, as though it were a given that such extras would be provided. "I'll see what we can do, ma'am," Sarah replied carefully. Eric stood slightly behind his wife, his expression a mixture of discomfort and resignation. He glanced at me once, a flash of something like shame crossing his face before he looked away. Neither Madison nor Tyler had even looked up from their devices to acknowledge their grandfather's presence. As the check-in process continued, I remained where I was, silently observing. The luggage cart was wheeled toward the elevators by the porter, who gave me a sympathetic glance as he passed. Other staff members moved about the lobby, many finding excuses to walk by and witness the scene, their eyes conveying messages of support to me and barely disguised disdain for my family. The humiliation was acute, but beneath it, something else was growing. A resolve. A certainty that what I was doing was necessary, not just for my own dignity but for the future of my relationship with my son and grandchildren. If this was how they behaved when they thought I was a mere janitor, then the lesson I had planned was even more essential than I had realized. As Elaine finished the check-in process, collecting key cards and information about the hotel's amenities, she turned and finally looked directly at me. "We're going up to our suite now," she said, her tone making it clear I was not invited to join them. "I assume you have work to do." I nodded slowly. "I do have some things to take care of. I'll see you all later." Eric at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "We'll text you when we're ready for dinner, Dad." With that, they walked toward the elevators, Elaine already on her phone, the children trailing behind, still fixated on their screens. Not one of them looked back. As they disappeared into the elevator, Sarah let out a breath she seemed to have been holding. "Mr. Reynolds, I am so sorry. I didn't know how to respond without." I held up a hand to stop her. "You handled it perfectly, Sarah. Thank you." Another staff member approached, her face flushed with anger on my behalf. "Sir, what your daughter-in-law said was completely unacceptable. Should we?" "No," I said firmly. "This is a family matter. I appreciate your concern, but please, continue treating them as you would any valued guests." I paused, then added with a slight smile, "For now." I walked away from the reception desk, feeling the eyes of staff and guests following me. The humiliation still stung, but it was tempered now by determination. I had built a business empire from nothing. I had weathered economic downturns, difficult partnerships, and countless challenges. This situation with my family was just another problem to solve, another opportunity to demonstrate the values that had guided my life. I took the service elevator to the executive offices on the mezzanine level, where Patricia was waiting for me. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. "That bad, huh?" she asked, closing her office door behind me. "Worse than I imagined," I admitted, sinking into a chair. She called me a janitor, told the receptionist not to talk to me, and Eric laughed. Patricia's expression hardened. "I'm so sorry, Duane. That's inexcusable." "The thing is," I said slowly, "if I were actually a janitor, that behavior would be even more unacceptable. The way we treat people when we think they can't benefit us reveals our true character." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "So what's our next move?" I leaned forward, determination replacing the sting of humiliation. "We stick to the plan, but let's turn up the temperature a bit. Once the initial shock subsided, Patricia and I refined our strategy in her office. I allowed myself a moment of genuine emotion, something I rarely indulged in business settings. My hands shook slightly as I accepted the glass of water she offered. In 40 years of business, I've been underestimated, dismissed, and even insulted, I told her quietly. But nothing cuts like hearing your own son laugh while someone belittles you. Patricia's expression was a mixture of sympathy and anger on my behalf. I could have security escort them out right now. Just say the word. I shook my head. No, that would only reinforce their view of me as someone who throws his weight around. This needs to be handled differently. I paused, gathering my thoughts. This isn't about revenge or humiliation. It's about teaching a lesson about respect and values, about showing Eric who he's becoming and giving him a chance to find his way back. Together, we developed a more nuanced approach. I would check into a standard room under my own name, while Eric and Elaine would receive their upgraded suite. Rather than making a scene or immediately revealing my ownership, we would orchestrate a series of small moments that would gradually reveal the truth. I want every guest in the hotel to receive exceptional service, I instructed. But I'd like you to ensure that everyone in the vicinity of my family receives something special, something extra. Complimentary champagne, appetizers on the house, room upgrades mentioned within earshot. Everything except their table. Patricia smiled slowly. Subtle, but effective. They'll notice they're the only ones not receiving special treatment. Exactly. And make sure all staff continue treating me with normal courtesy, not deference. Not yet. She made notes as we spoke. What about dinner reservations? They requested the summit for 7:30. Confirm their reservation, but make sure they're seated at a good table, not the best table. And ensure there's an empty premium table visible nearby, as though being held for someone important. As we finished outlining the plan, I checked my watch. I should get settled in my room before they try to contact me. Patricia walked me to the door. For what it's worth, Mr. Reynolds, your son made a grave error today. But people can change when confronted with their mistakes. I hope you're right, I replied, because right now I barely recognize him. I checked into a standard room on the 4th floor, deliberately choosing one that wasn't on the same floor as their suite. The room was beautifully appointed, of course, but lacked the panoramic views and extra amenities of the premium suites. After freshening up and changing my shirt, I sent Eric a text. Settled in my room. Let me know your dinner plans. His reply came an hour later. We're having dinner at the summit at 7:30. Meet in the lobby at 7:15 if you want to join us. If I want to join them. As though dining with my own family was optional, a privilege rather than a given. I replied with a simple confirmation and spent the remainder of the afternoon reviewing property reports in my room, finding solace in the familiar routine of business. At 7:15, I arrived in the lobby wearing a clean button-up shirt and my one concession to formality, a sports jacket. Eric and Elaine were already waiting, both dressed as though for a gala rather than a family dinner. Madison and Tyler were absent. The children are with the hotel's babysitting service, Eric explained when I inquired. They have some kind of movie night for kids. I would have enjoyed spending time with them, I said, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. Elaine checked her watch impatiently. The sitter was already booked. Perhaps tomorrow. We walked to the Summit restaurant, the hotel's fine dining venue on the top floor with spectacular mountain views. The hostess greeted us warmly, her eyes flickering to me with recognition before smoothly leading us to our table. A nice location, but noticeably not one of the prime window tables, several of which sat empty with reserved cart. Elaine noticed immediately. "Excuse me," she called to the hostess. "We'd prefer a window table." "I'm very sorry, ma'am, but those tables are reserved for special guests this evening," the hostess replied smoothly. "Special guests?" Elaine repeated, her voice rising slightly. "We're staying in a premium suite. Surely that qualifies us as special guests." The hostess maintained her professional composure. "Again, my apologies. I don't have the authority to change the reservations. Perhaps the manager could assist you tomorrow for another night." Throughout this exchange, I remained silent, observing the flush of indignation spreading across Elaine's face. Eric looked uncomfortable but said nothing to contradict his wife. As we settled into our assigned table, I noticed a server approaching a couple seated nearby with a bottle of champagne. "Compliments of the management," I heard him say. "We hope you're enjoying your stay." Elaine's head whipped around at the words. Her eyes narrowed as she observed similar scenes playing out at several other tables, guests receiving special treatment that conspicuously bypassed our table. "Is something wrong with this restaurant?" she muttered to Eric. "Why is everyone getting special treatment except us?" Our server approached with professional courtesy. "Good evening. May I start you with something from the bar?" "The table next to us received complimentary champagne," Elaine said immediately. "Is that standard for all guests?" The server didn't miss a beat. "That was for guests celebrating their anniversary, ma'am. Would you like to see our champagne list?" Throughout the meal, I watched similar scenes unfold. Neighboring tables received small complimentary appetizers from the chef. A family across the room was personally greeted by the sommelier, who brought a special vintage on the house. Meanwhile, our service, while impeccable, lacked any extras or special recognition. Eric grew increasingly quiet as the evening progressed, occasionally glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Elaine became more agitated with each perceived slight, her complaints growing less subtle. "I don't understand," she said after ordering dessert. "We're in one of the most expensive suites. We're exactly the type of guests who should be receiving preferential treatment." I took a sip of water before responding. Perhaps the hotel values something other than simply how much money guests spend. She gave me a look that suggested I couldn't possibly understand such matters. "That's not how luxury properties work, Duane. They cater to their premium clients." "Is that so?" I replied mildly. "In my experience, the truly exceptional establishments treat every guest with equal respect and courtesy." Eric shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Dad has built a successful business, Elaine. He might have some insight on customer service." It was the first time he had acknowledged my business acumen in months. A small victory, perhaps, but I would take it. As we finished our meal, the final piece of the evening's strategy unfolded. My old friend Thomas entered the restaurant, looking every bit the successful businessman in his tailored suit. He paused dramatically, scanning the room before his eyes landed on me. "Duane Reynolds?" he called out, his booming voice carrying across the restaurant. "Why didn't you tell me you were going to be here?" He strode to our table, clapping me on the shoulder with genuine warmth. "How long has it been? 2 months since that fishing trip?" "About that," I confirmed, standing to shake his hand. "Thomas, you remember my son Eric, and this is his wife Elaine." Thomas shook their hands with perfect courtesy. Of course. Wonderful to see you both." Elaine's expression had transformed from irritation to confusion to calculation in the span of seconds. I could almost see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to reconcile the janitor she had dismissed with someone who was on familiar terms with a man like Thomas, whose reputation in business circles was substantial. "Mr. Blake," she said, her voice taking on the honeyed tone she reserved for networking opportunities. "What a pleasure to see you again. I believe we met at the Chicago Business Leadership Gala last fall." Thomas nodded politely. "Possibly, though I meet so many people at those events. Are you enjoying your stay at Duane's place? The Aspen Grand is my favorite of his properties, though the Chicago Reynolds is a close second." The silence that followed was deafening. Eric's face drained of color, Elaine's mouth opened slightly, no words emerging. "I should let you finish your dinner," Thomas continued smoothly, apparently oblivious to the bomb he had just dropped. "Duane, let's catch up tomorrow. I'm here until Sunday." With a final handshake and a wink so subtle only I caught it, Thomas departed, leaving a wake of stunned silence at our table. "Dad," Eric finally managed, his voice strangled. "What did he mean by your place?" I took a deliberate sip of water before responding. I think Thomas was referring to the fact that I own this hotel, along with 21 others. But that's not important right now. "How was your steak?" Elaine's face had gone from pale to flushed in seconds. "You own this hotel." Each word seemed to cause her physical pain. "I do," I confirmed calmly. "I thought you knew. It's the newest property in the Reynolds Hotel Group, opened just 6 months ago." Eric stared at me, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face. "Why didn't you tell us?" I met his gaze steadily. "Would it have changed how you treated me this afternoon in the lobby?" He had no answer for that. Elaine, however, was already shifting into damage control mode. "Duane, if we had any idea." "Of course we would never." She faltered under my steady gaze. There seems to have been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I replied quietly. You saw an old man in casual clothes and assumed he was a janitor. Then you treated him accordingly. That reveals more about your character than any apology can address. I signaled for the check, which the server informed me had already been taken care of. It seems the owner has comped your meal, he said with a perfectly straight face. As we stood to leave, I noticed Elaine's hands trembling slightly as she gathered her purse. Eric wouldn't meet my eyes. The strategic response had succeeded perhaps too well, leaving them shaken but not yet enlightened. The real revelation would come tomorrow at the manager's dinner, where the final act of this necessary drama would play out. The morning after our uncomfortable dinner, I awoke early and took a quiet walk around the property grounds. The sun was just cresting the mountains, casting long shadows across the immaculate landscaping. I found peace in these early hours, appreciating the beauty of what my years of work had created. While passing through the lobby on my return, I overheard a heated exchange at the reception desk. Elaine's voice carried across the space, her tone demanding, "I need to understand why we haven't received any of the typical courtesies extended to premium guests," she was saying to the manager on duty. We observed numerous other tables receiving complimentary items at dinner, special treatment that we did not receive despite our suite category. The manager, Michael, handled her complaints with professional courtesy. "I apologize for any disappointment, Mrs. Anderson. I assure you that our staff treats all guests with equal respect and consideration." "Equal is not what I'm paying for," Elaine replied sharply. "Premium accommodations should come with premium service." I remained out of sight, observing the interaction. Michael caught a glimpse of me and gave an almost imperceptible nod before turning back to Elaine. "As a gesture of goodwill, I'd be happy to arrange a special amenity to be delivered to your suite this afternoon," he offered. This seemed to mollify her somewhat. As she turned from the desk, she nearly collided with me. Her expression immediately shifted, a forced smile replacing her previous irritation. "Duane, good morning. We were just sorting out a small issue with our room." "I see," I replied neutrally. "Everything resolved to your satisfaction?" "Yes, of course," she said quickly. "The manager has been most accommodating." The transformation in her demeanor was remarkable. Gone was the dismissive attitude, replaced by an almost painful politeness. The revelation of my ownership had clearly shaken her, though I suspected she was scrambling to recover rather than genuinely reconsidering her behavior. We made awkward plans to meet later for lunch with the children, and I continued to my room, where I found a message waiting from Patricia. The arrangements for the manager's dinner that evening were complete. This exclusive event, hosted quarterly for hotel investors, local business partners, and select guests, would provide the perfect setting for the final act of my lesson. Throughout the day, I maintained a cordial but distant relationship with Eric and Elaine. We toured Aspen together, the grandchildren finally putting down their devices long enough to enjoy the mountain scenery. I noticed Eric watching me carefully, as though seeing me through new eyes, while Elaine performed an exhausting pantomime of respect and interest in everything I said. Late in the afternoon, I returned to my room to find an invitation to the manager's dinner slipped under my door. The elegant card specified business attire and mentioned a special presentation to hotel investors. Similar invitations were typically sent to a carefully curated list of guests, primarily those with connections to the hospitality industry or potential investors. I had arranged for Eric and Elaine to be deliberately excluded from this initial distribution. As I expected, it wasn't long before my phone rang. "Dad," Eric's voice sounded strained. "Do you know anything about a special dinner tonight? Apparently there's some exclusive event for VIPs, but we didn't receive an invitation." "Ah, the manager's dinner," I replied casually. "Yes, I received an invitation earlier. I believe it's primarily for investors and business associates." "But you're going?" The confusion in his voice was evident. He still hadn't fully processed the implications of my ownership. "I am. As an investor, I was automatically included." There was a pause then. "Elaine is speaking with the front desk now, trying to get us added to the list. Since we're family." The irony of them suddenly claiming family connection when it benefited them wasn't lost on me. "I see. Well, I'm sure they'll accommodate you if possible." An hour later, Elaine texted triumphantly that they had secured last-minute invitations to the dinner. Little did she know that Patricia had been instructed to initially refuse, then reluctantly make an exception after sufficient persistence. I dressed with care for the evening, selecting one of the few tailored suits I kept for important business occasions. The manager's dinner would be held in the Grand Aspen Ballroom, the hotel's most elegant event space, with its spectacular glass wall overlooking the illuminated mountain landscape. When I arrived, the room was already filling with guests in formal attire. The space had been transformed with elegant lighting, beautiful floral arrangements, and tables set with fine china and crystal. A small stage area had been prepared at the front of the room, with the Reynolds Hotel Group logo discreetly displayed on a digital screen. Patricia greeted me at the entrance, professional in her role as general manager, but with a hint of anticipation in her eyes. "Everything is arranged as you requested, Mr. Reynolds. Your family has not yet arrived." I nodded my thanks and made my way through the room, greeting investors, local business owners, and loyal guests I recognized from other properties. Many expressed surprise at seeing me, as I rarely attended these events in person, preferring to let my managers handle the public relations aspects of the business. About 15 minutes into the cocktail hour, Eric and Elaine arrived. Both were dressed immaculately, clearly having spent considerable time preparing for what they believed was an opportunity to network with influential people. Elaine's eyes scanned the room assessingly, already identifying potential valuable connections. Their surprise at seeing me already comfortably engaged in conversation with several prominent business figures was evident. Even more surprising to them was my obvious familiarity with everyone in attendance. "Dad," Eric approached, confusion evident in his expression. "You know all these people?" "Most of them," I confirmed. "Many are long-term investors in my hotel group." Before he could respond, Patricia clinked a glass for attention, indicating that dinner would be served. The seating arrangement had been carefully orchestrated. I was placed at the head table with other major investors and local dignitaries. Eric and Elaine were seated at a table near the back, technically included but clearly not in positions of honor. Throughout the excellent dinner service, I could see Elaine straining to hear conversations at nearby tables, desperately trying to insert herself into the flow of the evening. Eric seemed more subdued, watching me with an increasingly troubled expression. As dessert was being served, Patricia approached the podium for the formal part of the evening. She welcomed everyone warmly, thanking them for their support of the Aspen Grand Hotel in its inaugural year. "Tonight, we're especially honored to have with us the founder and owner of Reynolds Luxury Hotels, the visionary behind not only this property, but 21 other award-winning hotels across North America. Please welcome Mr. Duane Reynolds." The applause was genuine and enthusiastic as I rose and made my way to the podium. From this vantage point, I could clearly see Eric and Elaine's table. My daughter-in-law sat frozen, her dessert spoon suspended halfway to her mouth. Eric's face had drained of color, his eyes fixed on me with a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. I began my speech with gratitude to the investors and acknowledgement of the hard-working staff. Then I transitioned to the core values that had built my business. "The Reynolds Hotel Group was founded on a simple principle," I continued, my voice steady. "That luxury isn't about exclusivity or status. It's about exceptional experiences delivered with genuine care. Every person who enters our doors deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, from the most frequent guest to the first-time visitor, from the CEO to the maintenance worker." I paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. "I began my career as a maintenance worker at a small motel in Vermont. Those early years taught me that every role in a hotel is essential. The housekeeper who ensures your room is immaculate, the maintenance staff who keep everything functioning perfectly, the front desk team who welcome you after a long journey. Without any one of these dedicated professionals, the luxury experience falls apart." My eyes found Eric's as I continued. "I've never forgotten those lessons. That's why, even now, you might occasionally find me fixing a light fixture in the lobby or helping the groundskeeping team plant new trees. It's not because I can't afford to hire someone else to do it. It's because I believe leadership means understanding every aspect of your business and never considering yourself above any task that needs doing." The room was completely silent now, guests listening attentively. Elaine had set down her spoon, her face a rigid mask. In an age where status often seems to matter more than substance, where the clothes someone wears might determine how they're treated, I'm proud that the Reynolds Hotel Group stands for something different. We believe in judging people by their character, not their appearance or position. We believe that true respect is earned through actions, not purchased with premium prices. Patricia returned to the podium, sharing several anecdotes about my hands-on approach that had become legendary among staff. She told the story of how I once spent an entire night helping the maintenance crew repair a broken heating system during a blizzard at our Denver property, ensuring no guest would wake to a cold room. Mr. Reynolds often says that he built this company from the ground up, she concluded, but what makes that statement unique is that he's never afraid to get back down to ground level when needed. As the formal presentation concluded and guests began mingling again, I made my way through the room, stopping to chat with various attendees. I deliberately saved Eric and Elaine's table for last. When I finally reached them, the tension was palpable. Elaine's social smile had crumbled entirely, replaced by an expression of mortification. Eric looked physically ill, unable to meet my eyes. "Enjoying the evening?" I asked quietly, taking the empty seat beside my son. "Dad," Eric began, his voice barely audible. "I don't even know what to say." Elaine attempted to recover. "Duane, this is all a misunderstanding. If we had known." I cut her off gently, but firmly. "If you had known I was the owner, you would have treated me differently. That's precisely the problem, isn't it? A person's worth shouldn't be determined by their title or bank account." Around us, other guests were beginning to connect the dots. Whispered conversations and subtle glances in our direction, indicating that word of yesterday's lobby incident had spread. The humiliation that had been mine was now reflected in their faces. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately," I suggested, noting their discomfort. "My office is just down the hall." They followed me silently through the ballroom and down a corridor to the owner's office, a space I rarely used but which had been prepared for this moment. Once inside, with the door closed behind us, the carefully constructed facades finally collapsed. "How could you do this to us?" Elaine demanded, anger temporarily overcoming embarrassment. "Set us up for public humiliation?" "I didn't humiliate you, Elaine," I replied calmly. "Your own actions did that. I simply allowed you to be yourselves without the knowledge of my position." Eric sank into a chair, running his hands through his hair. "Dad, you deliberately misled us. You let us think you were just." "Just what, Eric? Just an ordinary guest? Just a maintenance worker? And that justified how you treated me?" The directness of the question seemed to puncture something in him. For the first time, I saw genuine shame in his expression. "No," he admitted quietly. "It didn't justify anything." "Do you know what hurt the most?" I continued, my voice softening. Not Elaine's comment. "I've been underestimated my entire career. What hurt was hearing you laugh, seeing you become someone who judges others based on their perceived status rather than their character." Eric's eyes filled with tears, a sight I hadn't seen since his mother's funeral. "I don't know when I changed," he whispered. "I don't recognize myself anymore." Elaine remained standing, arms crossed defensively. "This was all some elaborate test? To what end, Duane? To prove your moral superiority?" "No, Elaine. It was a desperate attempt to reconnect with my son and show my grandchildren the values that built this family, before it's too late. Before Madison and Tyler grow up believing that a person's worth is measured by the brand of their clothes or the title on their business card, the truth of my words seemed to hang in the air between us. None of us spoke for several long moments. Finally, Eric broke the silence. "What happens now?" he asked, looking up at me with the vulnerability I remembered from his childhood. "That," I said gently, "is entirely up to you." The morning after the manager's dinner, I received a text from Eric asking to postpone our planned activities. "Elaine is packing. We're checking out early, but I'd like to talk before we leave." I wasn't entirely surprised. Pride is a powerful force, and Elaine's had taken a substantial blow. What did surprise me was Eric's request to speak separately. Throughout their marriage, he had rarely sought conversations without his wife present. We agreed to meet in a quiet corner of the garden behind the hotel. The morning was crisp and clear, the mountains sharp against the blue sky. Eric was already waiting when I arrived, sitting on a stone bench, staring at the view. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I said, taking a seat beside him. He nodded, not immediately turning to face me. "I used to love places like this. Remember those camping trips we took when I was a kid? Just sitting and looking at mountains for hours." "I remember," I replied softly. "You were never in a hurry back then, never worried about status or appearances." He sighed deeply. Dad, before Elaine comes down, I need to say something. I'm sorry. Not just for yesterday, but for who I've become, for forgetting what you taught me. The simple apology, delivered without excuses or qualifications, moved me more than I had expected. Thank you, son. Why didn't you just tell us you owned the hotel from the beginning? He asked, finally turning to look at me. Would it have made a difference? I countered gently. Or would it have just been another performance, another mask you put on when convenient? He winced at the truth in my words. You're right, and that's what scares me. I wouldn't have been real either way. When did it start, Eric? This person you've become? He thought for a long moment. It was gradual. Success in my career, moving in different circles, meeting Elaine. She has a way of making you feel like you're never quite good enough, never quite measuring up to some invisible standard. Eventually, I started seeing the world through her lens. And how does that lens make you feel? Exhausted, he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. Constantly judging, constantly being judged, never able to just be. We sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of his realization settle between us. In the distance, I could see Elaine emerging from the hotel entrance, overseeing the loading of their luggage into a waiting car. Her posture was rigid, her movements precise, even in retreat maintaining the appearance of control. She's hurt and humiliated, Eric said, following my gaze. But underneath that, I think she might be relieved in some way. Like we've been caught in a performance neither of us knows how to stop. What happens now? I asked, echoing his question from the previous night. Honestly, I don't know. We've got a lot to talk about, Elaine and I. About our values, our marriage, how we're raising the kids. He paused. About whether we're even compatible anymore. I placed a hand on his shoulder. That's a difficult conversation. The first of many, I think. He stood as Elaine's impatient gesture signaled it was time to leave. We still need to talk, Dad. Really talk. About everything. But not today. I nodded, understanding that real healing couldn't be rushed. I'm here whenever you're ready. Our farewell was awkward. Elaine maintained a cold civility, barely meeting my eyes as she buckled the children into their seats. Madison and Tyler, oblivious to the adult tensions, complained about leaving early, especially after learning their grandfather owned the cool hotel. As their car pulled away, I felt a mixture of sadness and hope. The weekend had unfolded nothing like I had anticipated, yet perhaps it had accomplished what was necessary. The foundation had been laid for honesty, even if the structure of our family relationships remained uncertain. The weeks following the Aspen incident were quiet. Eric called occasionally, brief conversations that carefully avoided deeper issues while maintaining connection. I respected his need for space, understanding that he was navigating his own path forward. 2 months after Aspen, Eric called with an unexpected request. Dad, would you be willing to come for dinner this Sunday? Just a simple family meal at our house. I agreed immediately, uncertain what to expect, but grateful for the invitation. When I arrived at their suburban Chicago home, I was surprised to find Eric cooking in the kitchen, wearing jeans and a casual sweater. The formal dining room remained dark. Instead, the kitchen table was set for a simple family meal. Elaine's greeting was reserved but not hostile. She, too, was dressed more casually than I had seen her in years, her usual perfect makeup minimal, her designer clothes replaced by comfortable slacks and a blouse. The children, to my astonishment, were not on electronic devices but helping to set the table. We've been making some changes, Eric explained, as he served a homemade lasagna, trying to focus on what matters. Throughout the evening, I observed subtle but significant differences. Elaine spoke less about status symbols and more about a community garden project she had recently joined. Eric mentioned considering a career change, perhaps moving away from marketing luxury brands. The children seemed more engaged, more present, sharing stories about school and friends rather than brand names or possessions. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. Awkward moments still punctuated the conversation, old habits occasionally surfacing. But there was an authenticity to the evening that had been missing from our family gatherings for years. As I prepared to leave, Eric walked me to my truck. It's a process, Dad, he said quietly. We're trying, all of us. That's all anyone can ask, I replied, embracing him for the first time in longer than I could remember. Over the following months, our relationship gradually strengthened. Eric began calling more frequently, sometimes just to ask advice about business decisions or parenting challenges. We resumed our tradition of fishing trips, this time including Madison and Tyler, teaching them the patience and appreciation for nature that had once formed such a bond between Eric and me. Elaine's journey was more complicated. Her identity had been so deeply entwined with status and appearance that finding authentic ground proved challenging. Our relationship remained cordial rather than close, but I recognized and respected her efforts to reconsider her values. The pivotal moment came almost a year after Aspen. During a family dinner at my home, Elaine approached me as I washed dishes in the kitchen. "Duane," she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I've been trying to find the right words for months now." I continued rinsing plates, giving her space to continue. "What I did in Aspen, how I treated you. It was inexcusable. Not because you turned out to be wealthy or successful, but because no one deserves to be dismissed like that." She paused, then continued with visible effort. "I'm sorry. Truly sorry, without qualifications or excuses." I turned off the water and dried my hands before facing her. "Thank you, Elaine. That means a great deal to me. I've been doing a lot of thinking this past year," she continued, "about who I became, who I want to be. It's not easy to face your own ugliness. Self-reflection rarely is," I agreed. "But it's the only path to genuine growth." She nodded, a hint of vulnerability in her expression that I had never seen before. "I don't know if Eric and I will make it. We're trying, but we've grown so far apart. What I do know is that I want to be someone my children can respect, not just someone they obey out of fear of disappointment." That honest conversation marked a turning point in our family's healing process. While Elaine and I never developed the warm relationship I had hoped for when Eric first married her, we found a mutual respect based on honesty rather than performance. My relationship with my grandchildren flourished as barriers fell away. I introduced Madison and Tyler to the satisfaction of working with their hands, teaching them to fish, build simple projects, and appreciate experiences over possessions. To my delight, they proved eager learners, especially once freed from the constant pressure to maintain appearances. A new tradition emerged from the ashes of the old. Each summer, when the family visited one of my hotels, everyone worked alongside staff for one day. Madison discovered an aptitude for hospitality management, shadowing front desk staff with growing interest. Tyler preferred the maintenance department, his natural mechanical abilities surprising everyone, including himself. As I approach my 70th birthday, I find myself reflecting on what constitutes true success. The hotel empire I built provided financial security and a platform for influence, certainly. But the real measure of my life's work isn't found in balance sheets or property portfolios. It's in the values that continue beyond me, the lessons that shape the next generation. Eric has found his way back to authenticity, leaving his high-pressure marketing position for a role with a nonprofit that provides business education to underprivileged youth. The salary is lower, but the purpose is greater. I see in him again the thoughtful, grounded young man I raised, though now tempered by hard-earned wisdom. Elaine ultimately left the marriage, a painful but necessary separation that allowed both her and Eric to pursue more authentic paths. To her credit, she has maintained a respectful co-relationship with Eric and a genuine interest in her children's developing values. We still see her at family gatherings, no longer performing perfection but striving for genuine connection. The most profound lesson from the Aspen incident was one I never anticipated. In trying to teach my family about judging others based on appearance or status, I learned something vital myself. True respect can't be demanded or purchased. It must be earned through consistent actions and unwavering values. Sometimes we must be willing to lose status to gain respect, to be humbled before we can be truly seen. Have you ever had to let go of appearances to discover what truly matters? Has someone in your life ever taught you an unexpected lesson about respect or authenticity? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more real-life lessons, and share with someone who might need a reminder about what truly defines a person's worth. Thank you for listening. And remember, in a world obsessed with status, genuine character still matters most.